You think I'm an ignorant savage, and you've been so many places. Hi everyone! It's another episode of You Talk. So, I got completely distracted. We were looking at the Murray-Darling, and it all leads to this. We know what the Murray-Darling is for the 75% of Australians who don't. Still can't believe that. We've gone into the factors which have led to protracted ecological disaster entirely of our own making. Is it fixable, Kyle?
Yes.
How can we save it?
So the solutions are there. The only thing we lack is political will. So there's some things we can do more immediately, and then there's some things we can do for the long term. What we can do more immediately is covered in a video that Jeremy Buckingham made, I think around, was it 4 years ago? It might have been 4 years ago, but basically he was recommending 10 things that we could do, I think it was, to save the Murray-Darling. And effectively, it involved changes in water licensing, in water usage. Essentially, it fixes a lot of the problems that we discussed in the last video. Outright recognizes that floodplain harvesting is illegal and bans it. And it kind of, in part, restructures the management around water management itself. It restructures the way that water is managed to a degree.
Okay.
Now, we'll link that video in the description below so people can watch that, as I, trying to quote it here, would probably get half of it wrong. And Jeremy Buckingham says it a lot better than I do. At the same time, we'll also link to a documentary called Blood Water, The War for Australians Water.
Blood Water.
Yes.
Now there is a good title.
Yes. And so we'll link to that documentary and that video, one by Jeremy Buckingham and one by the journalist and comedian Jordan Shanks. And so after those are implemented, there's a couple of things that we can do to safeguard the Murray-Darling and protect our food security over the long term. Now, Jeremy Buckingham talks about restructuring water management. However, I do have some additional ideas on how we should restructure water management in Murray-Darling. First off, we need to limit the crops that can be grown within the Murray-Darling to crops of a certain water intensity. Secondly, we need a more regional water intensity limit that results in the further upstream you go, the less water intensive the crops can be, and the further downstream you go, the more water intensive the crops can be. However, they all remain below that blanket water intensity limit. Now, this helps in part to ensure that a minimum amount of water is left in the river itself so that the health of the river continues to remain stable. And the river will recover over the long term from the damage that's already been done.
Can we do that in such a way where we don't just blanket say, if you're a cotton farmer, bugger off? Can we say, for instance, that, no more than X% of your thing can be using these crops that are of a nominally high water demand? Or can we say that your overall
water intensity?
No, just
water usage?
The entirety of your farm must fall below a certain water usage. So, like, if you want to play it fast and loose and like have a few cotton plants on like 5% of your farm and nothing else, go nuts, but where like the rest of that farm has to fall fallow.
See, the problem with that is that was essentially the concept of the water licenses that already exist. Now, there's
But
a few
apparently
problems
they're
with
not being
that.
enforced appropriately.
Well, they're not being enforced appropriately. The cap on the amount of water that can be taken out of the Murray-Darling was lifted from I think it was about
Optimistic.
380 gigaliters to 450. And that was done actually for more political reasons to so that they can say that it's all under cap.
So that
Whereas
sounds like a
it's not.
20% increase. And knowing
Yeah,
knowing the politics, they probably didn't really include a safety margin when they first determined how much water could be removed.
yeah.
So
So
they're borrowing against the future there, aren't they?
well, yes, but it's worse. They're not just borrowing against the future, they're borrowing against the present at the same time. And the debts are mounting, and we're seeing the effects of it.
Okay, this is a mixed metaphor that needs to be taken out the back paddock and shot. So I guess up next, forgive my deviation there, but I'm just sort of thinking, I really enjoy having the ability to have cotton gloves for handling archival materials, and I don't want to have to import them all from elsewhere. Like, this is a self-sufficiency question as well.
Yeah. So okay. So the thing is, the Murray-Darling might be Australia's largest river system, but it doesn't have all that much water in it. It's the water's spread out over a large area, and it's got less water than even much smaller river systems. And that's because Australia is a very dry continent to begin with. So we simply cannot grow cotton. However, at least in most places. However, if in certain years the water was plentiful enough that the end of the river system, where it flows out to sea, was receiving plenty of water, which currently it tends to not receive any water at all some years. The end of that
Mm-hmm.
river system in some years just dries up or receives very little water at all. But if properly managed, it could receive enough water on, at least in most years, that you could, at the end of that, grow some cotton. So if it was in one particular region, yes, you could grow some cotton. Now, that being said, in the other regions, we cannot grow cotton because there just isn't enough water to support that. What we can do is grow other fibrous materials that use less water. Hemp fibers, no, not the smokable drug, but another
I
strain of the
mean,
hemp plant.
yes.
I mean, look, I'm all for legalizing cannabis as it's, harmless, and the worst thing it makes you do is sit on your ass and watch SpongeBob all day. Yes, I know, very dangerous. People watching cartoons. Um, that's putting that all aside, there's another strain of the hemp plant which was selectively bred for its fibers, and it uses 1/4 the water that cotton does, and it uses half the land as well. That can also be used for textiles. So we can use it for everything cotton can be used for. It's also hypoallergenic and also naturally antibacterial. So it's better for your skin than cotton is. And it needs to be washed less than cotton does. So overall,
Okay,
it's a
okay,
much better material.
let's just stop right there. I do not want the hippies who cover their BO with patchouli using their bloody hemp clothing and saying, I don't have to wash it as much. It's like, mate, you haven't taken a shower in 2 years. Trust me, you need to wash it.
Well, I mean, look, it's funny enough. I actually know the limit on hemp clothing, and it's actually 3 weeks. Um, yeah,
I
you
don't
can
want to
go
know
three
how
weeks
you know
without
that.
washing it. But anyway, getting back to the main point. So this strain of the hemp plant actually doesn't grow the marijuana bud, so you can't smoke any part of it to get high.
Mm.
But it's very good for the fibers, and so you can grow textile materials that can be sold.
I mean, there's
Um,
also no reason not to take these fibers from existing operations that are aimed at serving the legalized cannabis market in Australia, the medical marijuana market, which
yes.
produce cannabidiol and delta tetrahydrocannabinol, aka the actives in THC, which respectively produce the relaxation and the sensation of euphoria. Like, I'm just saying, there's no reason we can't say, screw it, let's just grow cannabis,
Mm,
because the water consumption is basically identical.
yes.
But
But
for
the
the
thing
purpose of
is,
respectability, we need to be able to say, no, this is the legit stuff. It only makes clothes, not drugs.
yes. Well, that's, I mean, look, it's although it should be, it's a contentious issue, and
Mm,
the issue we're discussing today is not really whether or not to
no.
legalize cannabis. It's how to have textiles being grown in the Murray-Darling and at the same time not completely destroy the Murray-Darling. And the way to do that is to grow hemp fibers instead of cotton, and to grow less water intensive, um, less water intensive words, Kyle,
Props.
crops. And so, there's that. And there's also, in part, the other side of it, which is, I've discussed something I call the Murray-Darling Economic Development Strategy in
Hmm.
brief detail, which, involves high-speed rail, um, new city centers in the Murray-Darling,
As an
and
autistic person, I can confirm that I love this plan because it involves trains.
yes, yes. But at the same time, the most important, I guess, part of what the Murray-Darling needs is also more power in federal and state politics. See, the Murray-Darling itself,
Oh
it's
no,
split
no,
against four
Kyle,
states.
don't
No,
do
no,
it.
hear me
Don't
out, hear
do
me
it,
out,
Kyle.
hear me out. The
Kyle,
Murray,
don't do it.
I'm not doing what you think. I'm doing the other thing. So,
That's not
so
better, Kyle.
I don't think you know what other thing. Anyway, so the reason why we need the Murray-Darling Economic Development Strategy, in part for the Murray-Darling itself, is because having a higher population out there would mean it would get more representatives in federal and state parliaments.
Yep.
And so we need that. See, that's what I was doing, not the other thing, not the crazy idea I once came up with.
I'm just gonna quickly breach the crazy idea,
No, no,
right?
no. Let's
No,
save
no,
that for
no, no,
another
no.
time.
I'm gonna do it just
Hey,
quickly.
hey, that's
There
that's
was
my
some
baby. That's
no,
my
no, no,
baby.
Kyle,
I
we're
come
gonna
on.
demonstrate your commitment to being sensible here. He's only committed to being sensible temporarily. At all other times, he's committed to the psych ward. There was some research a while back that suggested that Australia could be divided along lines of natural resources, and while in some places that's
Not as well
effort for the
advised.
sake of not much, it does mean that effectively the Murray-Darling is just a chunk in the middle of Australia instead of being divvied up among four states. And it has been suggested before, why isn't the Murray-Darling just its own political entity? And I was honestly worried for a moment that Carl was going to say, screw it, the Murray-Darling is now a territory.
Well,
But realistically, if we look at an economic development strategy, part of that can also be having an advisory capability that would
well,
interact with all four of those state governments to ensure that the needs of the Murray-Darling as a cohesive ecosystem can be met across state lines.
I'm glad you said that, because that actually gives me the chance to talk about what I coined the Murray-Darling Intergovernmental Panel, which is essentially
Yes.
all of the state representatives, all of the federal representatives, and all of the local governments whose I guess electorates, or territories, or whatever, local government areas, um, are within the Murray-Darling in whole or in part, essentially come together to form this panel, almost like a pseudo parliament, where they discuss and then vote on recommendations to make to various state parliaments and federal government.
Are you going to
And
have like a time machine so that all those elected officials can deal with yet another bloody panel? Because that's the problem I'm seeing here. We already run elected officials off our feet, which is, I'm absolutely sure, the reason that frequently they don't show up to Parliament for important votes, right? Right?
well, lazy bastards. we've run out of time, so we'll talk about that another time. But essentially, what the Murray-Darling needs is a better system of water management, more economic development, a higher population to justify and also bring more voting power within various states and with various state parliaments and the federal parliament, and an intergovernmental panel that essentially crosses all levels of government for those representatives who in part represent Murray-Darling to discuss and come up with and then recommend to state and federal governments policies and plans and strategies to help the Murray-Darling to be more sustainable and to essentially just benefit the Murray-Darling. Again, kind of like a pseudo-pub, but for all levels of government to interact and work together to benefit what is the most important river system in this nation. Now, that being said, we've definitely just run over time, so we'll let you go. But thank you again for watching. I hope this 3-part series has been very informative. And I hope that you've learned something and we've given you food for thought. And then you can definitely go and contact your members of parliament and speak to them about what they can do for the Murray-Darling. So for now, let's go.
And I'm just going to suggest that in addition to food for thought, hopefully we will continue to give you food for your stomachs, because that is what this all comes down to.
Yes.
Can't eat if there's no water, folks.
Precisely. Couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you, Horse. Thank you, everyone.
See you all next time.
Catch you later.